Hi, you've reached the Talking Racewalking podcast. It's all about racewalking, of course. It's talking to racewalkers from around the world about racewalking. Join me, Noel Payne, a amateur racewalker in Canada, as I talk to elites, Olympians, record holders, masters walkers, and anybody who's out walking as fast as they can. Hi, so this is a section where I'd actually be talking to someone, a race walker. So this is where you can come in. If you know a race walker, you're a race walker, and you have an amazing story, I want to hear from you. So reach out, let's chat, let's get walking and talking. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Talking Racewalking. I've got my friend here who was one of the first people I met when I got into racewalking. Some of these episodes actually, it's kind of been fun to connect with people that I originally connected with when I was getting into this niche sport. And I've got Michael Mannozzi here with me. And correct me if I have pronounced your name incorrectly. What is the correct Italian pronunciation of your last name, Michael?
So the Italian pronunciation would be Mannozzi, but in the U.S. or the Anglified version, we just say Mannozzi.
I like it. Perfect. Well, and to introduce Michael, you can actually find out more about him in my racewalking book because he agreed to be profiled in that so I could talk about racewalkers in Canada and the U.S. So he is in my racewalking book. You can find that on Amazon, but I will tell you a bit about him so you know a little bit about who we're talking with. He's been racewalking for a while. We can talk about how he got into it, but he actually started being a wrestler before he started getting into racewalking. He is 37, almost 38 in April. And to give you some idea of his racewalking, he has racewalked a mile in 6:19, which that is insane. 5K, 21:19. 10K, 44:30, 20K, 1:31, and a whole list of accomplishments. He's been racewalking for a long time now. He's done the 20K, 35K, he's done a 50K. Recently just did the new relay, which we will get into in a little bit. And he has a number of experiences at the national, international level, as well as I think we've got 15 U.S. track and field championship titles, 17 national titles. He's been on the Team USA for a number of years, been into Pan Am Games, Pan Am Cup, World Cup. So he's done a few things. So he's a good guy to chat to about racewalking. So after that preamble, welcome to the podcast, Michael.
Thank you, Noel. That's quite a red carpet introduction. Thank you.
Oh, you deserve it. You've been at it for a while, and you're very, very humble about your race walking as well. I know when I started, you were so open to kind of like helping someone out get started in the sport. So that was so much appreciated. And we've had a good conversations over the last few years as well, race walking wise, both us being in the Air Force, that type of thing, or I was. So yeah, it's a neat connection. And like we were talking about before we started to get on this podcast, I really want to focus this podcast on a couple points. I want to talk about how you got into things, talk about where you're at now, the challenges you're facing, and what the heck was that relay racewalk experience like? So to start off, we'll kind of get that teaser out there so people are hanging on for the podcast. So they want to find out that juicy tidbit at the end. So we're going to start off with, tell me about how you went from wrestler and football guy into racewalking, because they don't always seem to be, those sports don't seem to always go together.
You're absolutely correct. I would certainly say my stepping into racewalking was not orthodox. I was a high school football player. Wrestling was probably my best sport in high school. Did 1 year track. I went to Notre Dame College in Ohio. They're now Division II. They were NAIA. Because they were NAIA, they had the race walk at the time, and that is so I walked onto the track and field and cross country programs, and I was just hopped around to different events because I wasn't on scholarship. So they weren't like, hey, we brought him in as a high jumper, we brought him in as a hurdler. There wasn't quite that expectation for me. It was kind of like, hey, let's see if you can keep up with the distance team. And so when I was throwing the javelin at one point, I was suggested by the javelin or throws coach to try race walking or to consider it. And he showed me the basics, had me try it in the athletic center. For the first time under his coaching, I saw the reaction on his face that showed that he was very impressed and approved of my picking up the technique a little bit. I had to wait until the next season to try it in a meet because it was towards the end. They were just focused on qualifiers at that point. But I had agreed and kind of quietly held it in my heart while I was wrestling, that goal to try race walking, that itch, that curiosity, kind of battling being my own worst critic because I'm like, no, not many people know about this, even in track and field. How is this going to look? How's this going to feel? Will I be successful? But I had a quiet confidence that it could be my kind of my calling or kind of my pathway to succeeding athletically. And I was on a national championship wrestling team, which forged, I think, the foundation of being willing to be relentless and work hard. I think that was forged a bit through that, even more so in the college level, to where when the college season ended, I transitioned smoothly into outdoor track, sorry. And I was just testing out the technique when I was in the wrestling room. When I used to clean the mats, I would test it where nobody could see you because I didn't know what it was supposed to look like. YouTube was still there. Not as much resources as now. This is 16 years ago. And then I would just, jam out to some REO Speedwagon and whatnot and try it out in the wrestling room. And then once, of course, when I mentioned that track season started outdoors in March of 2008, I took it to the streets of East Cleveland and, snow, cold winter, and really just took that step forward, in faith that it could see where this goes. And I had intrinsically felt that, my father had died due to MS. He couldn't walk the last 10 years of his life. How ironic that I'm now transitioning to try something called racewalking. So I felt that it had a bit more of a deeper meaning than just trying something new by that point. And I really liked it.
Because you said you went from wrestler and footballer and you got comfortable. What was it like race walking in public, like around where you lived? What was that like? Did you get a good reaction? How did you feel taking that publicly?
Very good question. Certainly at first, people don't know what to expect. Some people on the track team knew what it was and they're watching you do it because now they're watching one of their own teammates learn the sport, literally, put in the effort to get better at an event that they don't have anybody else to compare to on their team, but they would see it at nationals. So it was kind of a mixed reaction. I would get a lot of support from certain teammates. Some people in the school thought, hey, this is kind of neat. They already knew me, or they would know me by seeing me race walk around the campus for training because we didn't have a track. So I would go around the neighborhoods or a high school track. Interestingly, though, at the beginning, I did have a high schooler try to pelt me with snowballs, but he didn't realize I was a wrestler. And so I charged him. And I basically, I yelled at him in my commanding voice, and I chased after him, and he took off and he ran away. And after that, I hadn't been pelted anymore. He had pretty good aim, but I mean, it just was, maybe I don't know if I would have approached it that way today, but at the time I was just, 3 weeks off a wrestling mat and I still had that instinct. And so people laughed. Of course, people sometimes would yell things outside of their car windows. People would always be laughing at me. And, I'm in Cleveland, and to be fair, I'm from Youngstown. Not a lot of schools get introduced to that at the high school level. So there's not a lot of awareness of people of various backgrounds. They don't even know what race walking is. And I started to kind of become a regular, and I started to kind of grow thick skin. As much as I'm learning the technique and I'm building up my shins and such, I'm also in my calves. I'm simultaneously mentally becoming thicker skinned in terms of less self-conscious of what other people laughing at me at a red light or people's comments. There became a point in my career, I would say maybe in the last 8 years, I would start to educate people, or if I'm not doing a fartlek or an interval, I would stop and I'd say, "Oh, do you know what I'm doing?" I'd say, "I'm sure it looks funny to you. Did you know there's an Olympic event called racewalking?" And if most people don't, some people don't care, but 2/3 of the time I'd find that they would engage, and no matter what they thought, they left that interaction aware of the event where they were not prior. And I would tell them, if it's really short and I could tell they're not interested, I'd say, "Hey, it's in the Olympics. Check it out in London. Check it out in Rio."
Yeah.
That's what I would hit them with. So it's quick. And when they leave, you left them with something that they could actually fact check it. So they could watch the Olympics and they can know. I would love to give them the list, the world team champs, but I know you're going to lose them. You don't have that much time. You have an elevator speech of 15 seconds at max. So I would just hit them with that and I'd leave and I'd say, "Well, somebody else got introduced to race walking."
That's cool. I think that's a good way to approach it too, you know, I think we all understand that it's a bit of a niche sport, especially where we are. Not everybody knows what it is. But yeah, when you leave someone with something and they go, "Oh, okay, interesting," maybe they'll go back and check it out. I think that's a great approach to it. And I think, especially here in the US, that not as many people know about it. And mentioning that, now you're in the US, you were born in the US, but you did spend some time up north now. So we can kind of claim you as a part-time Canadian there for a little bit, can we not?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, it's funny because I experienced it in Canada too. People laughing. I was in Toronto. People would laugh at me. People sometimes would jeer at, make comments. And I ended up educating a lot of people at Sport Check. In my apartment building, we lived in an apartment building in North York. And so a lot of people, whether they liked it or not, became informed. And it was never anything that I imposed on anyone. People would ask or they'd snicker, or, that would present the opportunity. Or they'd say, "Hey, I see you out here every day. Why do you walk like that? Or why do you run like that?" Sometimes I would get those questions. But it became a point where just in anything, I find that you have a third of people care and are supportive. A third of people don't even know because they're in their own mind, their own world. They're not even thinking about you race walking by. And a third of people don't care because they don't care about other people's lives or successes or journeys, because maybe they're insecure, not happy with something in themselves. And that's anywhere. So I had that, of course, in the US, in Canada, and everywhere. And generally I've had a lot more supportive attitudes in the military, but it's still, that you're still going to get the other 2/3 of people that don't care. Maybe people aren't aware. But in Sport Check, when I was working there at Yorkdale Mall, my managers were supportive because of the reliance on footwear we have as race walkers or as runners as well. You and I have a running background as well, because I went on to run varsity for Notre Dame College. I simultaneously had to commit, when I committed to race walking, to indoor outdoor track and cross country, and I felt that they cross pollinated each other, the running and the race walking, and they helped
Totally.
me avoid injuries. So,
I,
and I really enjoyed. I enjoy being sorry.
no, that's good. Yeah, I agree with the running and the race walking thing. I think they go really well together. No, completely. And I agree with. I think what you experience in the U.S. and in Canada, they're very similar experiences. I think our border separates us with a few differences. We won't talk about politics, but there, but yeah, most of the time, I think when you get down to that on that personal level, there's not a lot of difference between Canadians and Americans. There's some different flavoring, shall we
Yes.
say? And you have the incorrect word for pop. I think you call it soda or something, but we won't get into that. But you at
Oh,
least
do
know
you?
about that.
I grew up saying pop.
Oh, well, good. Oh, maybe it's where you're from in the States, because I know there's a lot of people
Yeah.
that say soda, and we only use that for like soda water. So that's funny. But so I want to move you along because I don't want to miss out talking about that juicy tidbit at the end. And folks, you got to hang on to the last question, which is going to be about that. But so we know where you started. You really jumped on, and you were mentioning too. Now you were an NAIA champ in the 3,000 meters, right? Is that correct?
Yes, I literally went from walk onto the track team with no expectations from the coaches, and a lot of my teammates, of course, to literally becoming the first walk on to ever qualify for nationals, then later to become the school's first ever male All-American in track and field, then to national champ, of course, male or female. So it went from like quite the Cinderella story at my college.
Yeah, no, and like we've talked about all your times and everything like that, and you've done really well. And we're talking about like a lot of Pan Am Games, 2011 through to like 2017. And anybody listening, go check out Michael's profile. It's on World Athletics. There's also a Team USA that gives you some information on him as well. But what I want to talk about now, while we have the chance, is accomplished race walker. But over the last few years, it's been a bit of a struggle with the injury and stuff like that. Tell me kind of how that happened and what's the road back been like trying to get back into the form you want to be.
Very good question. That is certainly the search for the lost ark in a lot of ways. It seemed like 2017, I first was injured. I might have been my popliteus. I'm not quite certain because back then I didn't really have the insurance. I was still stateside and then moved to Canada, and I had other family issues and immigration to deal with that took priority over even trying to address that injury. And I ended up getting back into some racing form from, I'd say, 2019 and through 2021. About 2021, right before I deployed, I really noticed that about one day a week, I would have a pain in my groin. It ended up becoming undiagnosed at first because I deployed. They just ruled out a hernia. We're intense. We're expeditionary in the middle of the desert. There's not much they can do unless it's a critical situation. So I come back from deployment, summer 2022. I escalated. At this point, I'd made the U.S. team deployed, which is like never happened before in the United States Air Force. And that allowed me to have more leverage to request an MRI. So I got an MRI. It confirmed a tear at my adductor. What wasn't known, what I found out when I got into the world-class athlete program, moved to San Diego to train with the walkers out here, I run into the injury getting worse, and quite a bit worse, to where I can't race walk with it. So now this is so many levels of not good. And I get another MRI at the naval base. That took a process, just the lingo of cross branch and why I'm out here because there's no Air Force base, all that fun stuff. I get the MRI February of last year, and it confirms that the tear is still there, of course, as we expect, but it confirmed that it's at the tendon, not the muscle, which explained why the physical therapy and other exercises I was doing were not helping. It's because a tendon, of course, does not get as much robust blood flow, takes more time. So I had to accept that it could all be over. In fact, even in your book, I identified with the fool in the pajamas, right? I identified with his thought of, I'm going to race walk until I can't, so I'm not breathing. And I thought to myself, well, I'm going to try until I can't try anymore and figure out a way to help myself the best I can, because even if you can't race walk, you still want to be healthy. You still want to get the health benefits and find a way, and at least know that you did everything you could, exhausted all your resources. So I got a cortisone shot in March. It just solidified where the pain was, the area where the pain's coming from.
And this area you're talking about too, and if people who aren't familiar, this muscle group you're talking about, fairly important, shall we say, in race walking. So
very critical.
Yeah. So race walking and running are very similar. The hip moves, but those hips move a whole bunch more in race walking, and those muscles are activated in a different way. So yeah. So once you sort of had identified it and you started treatment, where are you at now in terms of training? Are you able to get back in full use of everything?
Yes, since my PRP injection back in June, I have, of course, had to take some time off of any, we call it light duty, any activity. Then I slowly came back. Perseus has had me literally power walk, hit the bike, hike, progressing all the way up to November of fully race walking. In November is when I started actually a program around race walking for the first time in over a year. And so we were apprehensive naturally. Yet, what choice do you have but to try? You have to try to move forward. You have to see how your body responds, because you either aren't over the injury and more needs to be done, more intensive measures, or you are able to train and have the benefit of getting back onto the life and leisure benefits that you get from race walking that you enjoy and are aiming for.
No, completely. Anybody who didn't catch that, he said Percy, and that's Perseus Kallstrom, if I'm not correct. So you've got somebody who's got a lot of international experience as well. You might actually have more race walking years under your belt, but it must be nice to have that coach and guidance as well.
Absolutely. There's no comparison to having that. I think the Air Force supporting having him on board, because it certainly would be difficult for me to do it on my own. Perseus has been, he's won world medals. He's, I think, tied for the most international medals in Sweden's history. He's on the way, looking to break it. Top 10 in the Olympics. It's just a different conversation, and he's very good about just getting down to the meat and potatoes of what you need to know. He tries to be very objective, and I appreciate that. And he doesn't. He's a pretty calm person. So someone like me, who's very extroverted and energetic and driven individual, he's driven in a different way, and it's good for me to be exposed to that and to kind of learn from him. And I've always admired that about like Anaki and Evan. They're a different personality, but we each our own personalities, but it doesn't mean you can't learn and pick up little nuggets from others.
Yeah.
That you say, hey, you know what, this might be actually beneficial for me to apply this.
Yeah, exactly. Whether it's the physical training part or even like the mental approach to things, I agree. And I've had a chat with Perseus, and I'm still trying to track him down for a podcast episode. So I'll keep mentioning, hey, I talked to one of your athletes, and I was talking to somebody else Tom Bosworth, who's so I'm narrowing down on Perseus. So Perseus, if you're listening to this, I am tracking you down. You said you'd do a podcast, but I know you are busy. So all good. So
he's hard to catch, right? Well, we might have to bring in Alvaro or one of the, maybe Alvaro Martinez, Spain, to help reel him in for us for right now.
Well, I still do some running. I don't think I could catch him on race walking, but I think I could pin him down on a run if I had to have to go after him. But my running kilometers are going down. The race walking is pretty much takes up most of my time. So
great,
Michael, I am going to get down to the juicy tidbit that I think a lot of people are probably wondering about. Some elites have experienced it, and a few others. I know it's a couple of Canadians that managed to get out for one of the first marathon relay events down the US, which you were there as well. So the question, folks, that I'm asking Michael is about, if you haven't heard it, I don't know where you were buried or what you put in your ears so you didn't hear about it, but there is a new race walk event that's being premiered, the Paris Olympics, at least officially in a large, really championship type of event. There's a bunch of events that are kind of popping up now in a scurry to try and get people qualified and to qualify teams for this. It's a 42.2 kilometer race with male and female race walkers, where the distance of 42.2K is split up. So people aren't race walking 10K. So there's no 10K records. And they're kind of strange distances that have never been raced. Sorry, folks, if you can hear it in my voice, you can probably guess what my opinion of this is, but I want to get Michael's experience, because maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. So I'm looking for, what was your experience for this 42.2K mixed gender race walk relay? And I will temper this with the fact that Michael, from what I saw in photos and video, did have to do it in pouring rain. So Michael, we've got 10 minutes before this podcast ends. Give me your thoughts on what went on for this race walk relay. What was your experience?
It was difficult to try and set expectations going in for multiple reasons. One, the biggest overlooming was my injury and my return to sport. and only having 2 speed sessions before the event. That was my personal largest challenge.
Okay.
This event challenge that most athletes in this event shared is that we've never done it. So some big questions. What do you do during the break? Where are you allowed to go during the break? What works during the break? These are why, talking to someone like Percy, I reached out to Nick Christie, who I train with in San Diego when he's down here. Just amazing the thought behind it. But you do not want to just do nothing during that break, right? So that's just a free kernel for anybody. You also don't want to be out there spending 10, 15 minutes warming up for your second leg. You don't need to. You're going to feel like crap your first couple laps because you're going to be, or feel stiff, or let it be your slowest kilometer. That's to be expected in your second leg after your break. However, what we found was, number one, you want to change. We learned, like, get your fuels in you once that break happens. So I'm going to take a step back to my first relay. We didn't race it like a 10K, because it's really more like a 22. It's really 22K that you're racing. And so that first leg, I told my relay partner, I don't care what you do, because you don't have to cheer me on. I want you to focus on your race, because the female partner equally has half that, almost half that race. Really, you share the race. And so you rely on each other. I paced it the best I could without a lot of speed training, so that I would try not to go out too fast and crash the second leg. That was my personal goal. So I'm going to try to speak just from my opinion, my own experience. I can't speak for the other athletes.
Yep. Fair enough.
I personally, it's a much faster race than, say, a 50K. So what it's replacing, I'll hit on that a little bit later. But what I found was, I paced it a little bit slower than what I thought would be my max speed for, say, 10K, or 20K, to be safe. During that break, I immediately got feedback on technique from someone. I let my WCAP director know that, hey, I'm going to change. You won't see me for about another 30 minutes or so. I got out of the rain. First, I had to go grab my backpack. Got out of the rain. I changed in a recruiting station. There was an Air Force recruiting station. I already planned ahead to use their office to train, to utilize their facility to change in. And so while I'm changing, I'm getting out of my wet clothes. I'm taking a gel. I had fluids, electrolyte drink that I'm sipping in water. I also had dry clothes, dry hat, dry socks, dry shoes to change into. So I had a rotation of shoes. I had my Pumas, my Adidas, and my Reshods, and I just would base it on training, what I did in training. Just keep it simple, what worked for you in training and wet weather, and what do you need for today, and I went with it. And so I changed my clothes, got everything dry on. I applied anti-chafe, of course. I got worked on by one of the massage therapists. Shout out to Rich Robert. He helped communicate to another massage therapist to come in and work on me out of the rain. Just only like a 2-minute session. Then I had to warm up. I stretched really well. I did only a little bit of warm up. I stayed out of the rain as much as possible just to prevent me from getting cold. And with a lap to go, really with 2 laps, they wanted to do there, but I waited till a lap to go because I could hear the announcer. But I stayed out of the rain. I also liked staying away from the race, away from the stimuli, because sometimes I didn't want someone coming up saying, hey, I saw you're in the air. Like, not the time to talk about it. It's business for every athlete. It's a race. You're still in the race, even though it's a weird feeling to have that break. So it's a new challenge. And then that second lap, like I said, you're going to feel a little bit crappy. Your first couple laps, I found myself struggling the whole last 10K, but I loved it because it forced me to dig deep. I loved it because it forced me to question why I'm out there, what I love about race walking. And really, in my mind, even though I was challenged as everyone else later I found out was hurting, if not more than me, I thought, you've raced 50Ks. You know what the last 10K of a 50K feels like. This is equivalent to that psychologically, and possibly that might be because of my injury and not having a fast 10K. Like, now I'm doing 2 of them, right? Really a 12K and a 10. I haven't raced one in over a year, this distance. And the last thing I raced that really counted was a 35K. This is a change of gears for me personally, but I loved it because it just, number one, I'm not injured. I'm race walking personally. Number 2, I thought, you know what? If you can beat one or two people on this leg that went out too fast the first leg, it plays to your advantage of having that endurance experience and that mental fortitude. And it did. I finished top eight. Top eight were in the prize money. I had to hunt down someone, just one athlete and catch them. It played out that way, fortunately for me. And I reeled in a couple other people that I didn't catch, but I cut their lead down. So when I compared my second leg split with three people that finished in front of me, their gap on me was significantly less. For example, fifth place at this race, I finished eighth on the men individually. This fifth place, he was like 5 minutes ahead of me in the first leg. He was 1 second ahead of me in his second 10K. That is just astronomical.
That's amazing. Well, from what I see, I mean, it's a very unique event. And folks, I think if you're listening to this, you do realize, of course, if you're not already aware, that there are relays at this, but this one's actually even stranger because there's the male-female thing, but then there is a dramatic amount of time that you have to wait where you're not doing anything. And I think you've addressed what you did there, but that makes it a very unique event. It's not just a relay where it's four people race walking one to the other, and there's no waiting time. You hand off one person, another person hands off like a 4x1 or a 4x4. It's a relay. In this person, it's two people, but four legs. So that in itself is unique. I love how you describe it as being, that endurance challenge. It's not a 50K, but it has aspects of mentally and physically that. We can't go on too long, but I need some short answers here. So what I'm going to do is, overall, did you like the event?
Absolutely loved it. Absolutely loved it. The only thing I don't like is I don't like to see the 50K removed from the program. And I don't like to see the quotas lowered, so less athletes in the Olympic events. Overall, that's what I don't like, but I do like that there's a male-female aspect that takes care of the gender parity in our sport that's been, championed for so long. And I think that in that sense, it's positive, but I love the team aspect. I thrive on that, and I thrived on the challenge because I found what I did in that break either made or broke me to hold my own at this event.
I love it. We can go on chatting forever, and we might, guys, Michael and I might chat offline after this for a few minutes, but I've got to wrap this up. I know as well that in this day and age, everybody's used to fast moving movies and YouTube videos, so attention spans are small. So I kind of keep it to short podcast episodes. Michael, I'd love to have you back on and chat more about this. I hope we gave everybody a quick snapshot into Michael's race walking and a view of perhaps an experience of the new relay event. And thank you again for joining me. And we'll definitely touch base soon because I want to find out how that full recovery goes and how you're chasing that dream of chasing that, wherever you're going, because I know you've got something left in you. You're only 38. So I know you got something left in the tank to give. So we'll definitely touch base later. Thanks again for talking race walking.
Thanks, Noel. Honored to be on here, and we'd be happy to do it again.
Sounds good. Take care. Walk happy.
Thank you as well. Cheers.
That's it, folks. The end of the podcast. No walkers have been harmed in the recording of this podcast. And of course, at the moment, we have no sponsors or supporters at this point to fund all this amazing podcasting. But if you're out there and have a race walk company that produces some sort of race walk apparel product or something you think race walkers would love, get hold of us. We'd love to have you on board. Give us a holler.